understand my English Russian accent, I guess. So I'll try my best, and I have to speak slower because I tend to speak faster. So tonight is a lecture about Vaastu Shastra. Anybody heard this, Vaastu Shastra? Could you please raise your hands? Some people, okay, all right. But most people didn't, and I'm not surprised. I found out about Vaastu Shastra in 2004, and that's, I was actually programming software, and I hated my work. And I decided that I have to make changes in my life, and because in St. Petersburg I studied architecture, so I decided to quit my job and do something special for people as my heart desired. That brought me to India. So before I start my presentation to you, I would like to say that Vaastu is pure energy. Vaastu is manifested energy. So we are Vaastu structures. We have vibration, we have inner sound, and we'll talk about that tonight. And so basically these teachings are very ancient. It's about 10 to 15,000 years old. And I follow South Indian train of thought. And my guru was Dr. Ganapati Stapati. But I would like to start with this saying first. In space, through architecture. In form, through sculpture. In body, through dance. In words, through poetry. In sound, through music. And in thought, through mathematics. When man discovers rhythm and order, he touches the divine inside himself. It's a traditional aphorism from India, translated into English. So, rhythm and order. We're going to talk about that because that's about vibration, that's about sound, and that's what we had yesterday. We had a wonderful lecture about tuning forks and how it affects our mind, actually, yeah, and our nervous system. So the essence of Vaastu Shastra is very simple. It's a complicated subject, but at the same time, it's simple. The most essential is to bring people who are living in buildings in total resonance with universal vibration of the cosmos. Because cosmos by itself is a huge field of consciousness, and it has its own frequency of vibration. So every building should be tuned with its own space and energy inside to the universal space and to the people who are going to stay there, live there, sleep there, and work. So that is the most essential, to bring everybody to resonance and connection to the absolute vibration of the universe. That is the task. According to the tradition, I don't have to, but that's how it goes. I would like to introduce my guru first, Vaastu Shastra guru, Dr. Ganapati Stapati. This short video was made in 2011 in February, yes. And he passed away in September of that year. That was my last visit when he was alive. So he was sitting in his small little house in Mahabalipuram, which is South Indian Tamil Nadu. He usually would say, Vannakam, madam. Vannakam is in Tamil, hello. So I would say, Vannakam, Dr. Ganapati Stapati. And he would say, madam. And one time I said, please, can you give me some Indian names so you will remember my name and I will remember this Indian name. And he said, Mandodari. That's right, Olga Mandodari. Because Mandodari was apparently a daughter of ancient architect, Brahmarishi Mayan. And his name is in many epics of ancient India. So let's listen what Dr. Stapati Ganapati said here in this short video, he is reading a book which is in Tamil language in poetic form. They're basically chorals, they call choral. So this book was very special. When I went first time to India in 2005, I was sitting in the library and going through his amazing books, what he had, and suddenly he walked in and he screamed. He said, "Madam, this book is the most essential, most important, you have to save it." And that book is called Ain Tiram, or it's about dance of Shiva, or about dance of the universal space, vibration, and consciousness. And that book was collected, basically, the information for that book in 1985 for a conference. So Dr. Stapati said a gentleman, a very old man, came from Tanjavur. It's a Tamil city where there is a beautiful Brihadishvara temple, Shiva temple, and so they have also a wonderful library, Saraswati Mahal library. And in that library, this man worked entire life, and they saved ancient scriptures on palm leaf. So they keep them against bugs, they use special oils, and they try to save them for generations to come. So anyhow, this man came and he said, "I have a very important message to Dr. Stapati." He said, "I would like you to listen what I brought for you." And he sat kind of in trance, and he recited about 10,000 sutras. And so Dr. Stapati said he basically hired several typists, that's how it was during that time, and they recorded it. And it was all in Tamil, and then it was translated into English. So he is reading here some important sutras, and let's listen what he said, and I will explain because he speaks fast and with his accent, but let's listen.
This is very simple that people don't know of this kind of inner being and outer being and how they vibrate. They all need to understand. This vibration of inner being and outer being, and they resonate with each other.
Okay, I'm sure you didn't understand because it was fast and maybe not all words you understood. But so he said, there is inner being and there is outer being. They all vibrate. What it is inside of you, it's the same outside. And when they resonate, we call it experience. And that's also called yoga. And that's what we do in Vaastu Shastra. We try to bring you into resonance, your inner being with outer being, through the architecture, through the spaces. We calculate precisely according to very important dimensions. The unit of space, which is called angular. Actually, paramanu, I will talk about that. So, and he said most people don't understand, they don't know that. And so that's why most of us here, especially in the West, we don't know anything about Vaastu Shastra, but it's a very ancient teaching. And a lot of people know about Feng Shui, right? But not many people know about Vaastu Shastra. Through years of research, I think Feng Shui actually came from Vaastu Shastra because a lot of writings were found by old Chinese travelers, and they were talking about this subject. And then it kind of sprung on its own in China because they have also traditional medicine, Feng Shui, but in India, they basically it just went as thousands of years ago. It's still protected. And why I follow South Indian teachings? Because, well, number one, I think it was divine grace that I found him and straight went to India to him, and I did not look for anybody else after that because I realized that this man was amazing, and that's how it happened. So they were able to protect ancient scriptures. Because as you know, India was invaded many times, and during Mongols, they destroyed temples and they built mosques on basically foundations of temples. British came, destroyed a lot and burned a lot of old scriptures, and they would amputate arms of Indians who would practice Ayurveda because they were scared of things which they couldn't even understand British. How you can push something here and you're paralyzed, you're not moving. So they were very scared. And they destroyed a lot. So that is 250 years and 400 years of other invasions. So, but South India was relatively untouched because of the climate, and people were hiding, and a lot of ancient scriptures in old Tamil language is still intact. And Dr. Ganapati Stapati had suitcases of these palm leaves. And when his father was, because he's traditional architect, 11th generation, he said, my father, madam, he would come from the market, my mother would ask him to buy food, but he would bring this old palm leaves, and we would have nothing to eat. And my mother was yelling at him, and he would save this. So he said now he has an incredible collection, and he was able to read this. So basically, I was very lucky, and all the students who studied from him, I think were just blessed that we were able to meet this incredible man who spent more than 35 years studying Vedanta. His father actually was a devotee of Ramana Maharshi, and the Shivananda's, the Maharshi's ashram in, I think it's the
Tiruvannamalai.
Yes, Tiruvannamalai. So there is a statue of Ramana Maharshi, black, I think it's marble or granite, and that was done by Dr. Stapati's father. Yes. And so Ramana Maharshi actually, when he was alive, Dr. Stapati was a little boy. Father brought him to him, and he told Ramana Maharshi Ganapati Stapati when he was a boy that this boy is going to do a lot of important things. In life he will be successful. But he was just a little boy during that time, but he did. If anybody went to India and at South Indian subcontinent, so it's called Kanyakumari. It's a very south point of India. There are two big rocks in the ocean. And so one rock has a huge statue, Tiruvalluvar. So he was the one who built that. So he was awarded by government of India a title Padma Bhushan. So it's a very high title for achievements in architecture and art. And that monument was done by strictly Vaastu Shastra rules, and we will talk about that. So I'm going to start a short presentation because most of you don't know what Vaastu Shastra is, but the plan for today, I'm just going to give you like the most essential about the structure of the space and why this building is so important. Tomorrow night, I'm going to give you a little bit more information, which is related to some interesting research I did recently, and I found a man who was living in the last century in the United States, and he was enlightened in his own way, and the books he wrote, they're absolutely in resonance with Ayintira. I was just speechless when I found that, and I wanted to share it with you because for me that's another proof of these ancient teachings that they're true. Because something unrelated to somebody unrelated to India in the beginning of last century was talking about almost the same stuff, so that is incredible. And the third lecture I will deliver on Sunday morning, that's about how I enhanced energy with the help of my husband in our house, which we purchased, and it's not Vaastu Shastra house, but how we were able to basically make the energy better there. So we'll talk about that. Yeah? So let me start my presentation. It's very short and it plays on its own because I tend to deviate and give many stories, but this will keep me straight on the point. So it's supposed to be 15 minutes. But then after that, I will show you something very interesting. Okay, let's start. Okay, so let's see. So system, grid system and architecture and design. After that, remind me, we'll do some little meditation. So the goal of Vaastu Shastra is to bring health, prosperity, and spiritual bliss with buildings. So to live in harmony with subtle nature is the aim of Vastu science and technology. To rediscover the ancient science of Stapati Veda through healing architecture. It means the architecture which is aligned with universal vibration, with the flow of energy going through cosmos, through planet Earth. So we need to do one. This is Dr. Ganapati Stapati. That was 2007. He was invited to Woodbourne, Canada, and that's where he gave his first lecture. And I was invited by him. That's how I found Shivananda Ashram. So from that time, I'm still Shivananda Ashram. This is a divine architect Mayan, and he lived about 10,000 years ago. And he is at the continent Jambu Dwipa, which sunk. And so the teachings are coming from that sunken continent. This is how it looks like palm leaf. This is old Tamil language. So that is very important. See, Brahma Bindu, idea, explosion, Brahma Sutra, creating energy waves. So that is the most essential in this theory. Brahma Bindu is a point of consciousness. So when we start thinking, we explode and we start spinning inside. And we emit energy called Jivatmas, tiny little energy cubes coming out from us, and the same universe is doing. Entire universe is built from tiny little cubes of energy called Paramanu, para super atom, but not the atom what scientists think, yeah? So the whole universal grid, the big one is called Vishva Purusha Mandala, that's our cosmos, and the small one is Vaastu Purusha Mandala. So Vaastu is manifested energy, Purusha is soul, universal soul, Mandala design. So this is a string of vibration of consciousness or light, like in a light bulb, yeah? So that's also called a Shiva Nataraja dance. So that is vibration. So when we start thinking, we actually, there is a line of energy, light energy, inside of us vibrating and creating waves of energy. That's why we feel somebody's thoughts sometimes. The positive or negative, that is vibration. So the whole space is vibrating. So the whole space is made from tiny little cubes of energy, Paramanu, and it's like a grid pattern. So the goal of Vaastu Shastra, as you see here, the universal space grid pattern, the earth has its own grid pattern, and the house has a grid pattern, and you do too. So we need to bring this all into resonance, and then it will be just like that. You will be resonating with the space, the universal space, with cosmos. So the whole grid by itself in each house has its own qualities, and they're called Panchabhutas. Pancha 5, Bhuta, creative elements. It's a space, fire, air, water, earth. That's similar in Feng Shui. Many ancient temples, they were built, this in Angkor Wat, in Cambodia, according to these teachings. So this beautiful temple has a grid pattern, and it's a very powerful pattern, and there are dimensions there. Even the faces, they have a special pattern and design when they're designed. So this Borobudur Java, see, it has its own grid as well of energy. Everything is according to specific design to create a very strong vibration. So that is basically a temple in Tanjavur. It's called Brihadishvara temple, and it has its own grid pattern, and it has its own design and rules of design. It has a head, it has a body, it has heart. Scientists, in 2014, it was a publication done, that actually scientists discovered that our neurons with the huge magnification intersect under 90 degrees. So 90 degrees is the angle of Vaastu Purusha Mandala. So the energy, this is New York's artist, Alex Gray. He basically so what happens, the whole space is a grid pattern. And this space is made from tiny little cubes, the Paramanu dimension. And in order to use that dimension in construction, we have to multiply it. scientists know by now that actually void, the vacuum, is not empty, because all the elementary particles are jumping out from nothing. So Dr. Stapati said, madam, that's not nothing. In our scriptures, we knew this is a light energy which is not seen by physical eyes or our equipment, but our ancient seers, rishis, they saw that. They saw the pattern. So that pattern is basically very simple. It's 90 degrees angles, lines of energy, and they have names. So the very simple pattern is 9 by 9 grid. It's called Vaastu Mandala. And there is another pattern which is used in design called Manduka Mandala. So Manduka Mandala is 8 by 8. So 8 is the most important sacred number. It's like also like infinity, yeah, when it just goes horizontal. So 8 is a very sacred number in Vaastu Shastra. And in anywhere, if you look at your pranayama, you inhale on 4, for example, retain on 8, yeah? Exhale on 8, or inhale on 8, retain 16, exhale 16, or inhale on 8, retain 16, exhale 32, and you go like that, right? So you think, why do I use these numbers for breathing? Because that's how prana fluctuates, and prana is the part of cosmic space. So that is another proof that you're using these numbers not randomly, because you're actually trying to align yourself, your mind, your body with the universal vibration. So that mandala, 8 by 8, is called Manduka from Manduka Mandala. So Manduka Mandala is used for temple construction. But for houses, we use another mandala, which is called Paramasaika, 9 by 9. Because what happens in a subtle space, just imagine that's a grid of energy 8 by 8, and suddenly when the transformation of energy becomes material, things appear. That mandala becomes 9 by 9, and it's called pranava. Pranava means nava is 9, so 8 becomes 9. That is the unique kind of quality of our universal space where we live. So 9 by 9 is very important mandala we're using in construction. So when you measure, when you go back home, measure your palm from the top of this finger to the end of the palm, and it should be 9 times your body height. If you have that, you have a perfect body. But it doesn't have to be, of course, but that's how they measured. So all deities, all sculptures for ancient temples, they had very strict calculations. So the temple by itself is the kind of the biggest secret for us, how that temple works. So temples are important because they are generating energy. So whenever you go, I suggest to go to South India because it's a very specific type of design, and so their temple is different than in the north, and they're very ancient, and plus they allow foreigners to come because in the north, not everybody will be allowed to go to the temples, but South India is welcoming, so you can visit the temple. So when you go closer to the Garbha Griha, it's actually a uterus, but in the temple, it's a uterus of the temple. So the deity is sitting there, calculated, made from specific material, which most of the time black granite. And I will explain why. And so the deity, Shiva Linga or Ganesha or Shiva itself will be a metal. So different deities, they will be calculated to the space where they sit in the shrine. It's not random. So why is it important? Why we have our dimensions? Why it is important to have specific dimensions for the house? Because when you look in the nature, you see like trees, they have leaves, right? And they have, we mentioned about Fibonacci numbers, right? Sequences. So we see everything is opening up in the spiral form. Every flower, when you see, it's kind of folded, yeah? And then it opens up like this. And it opens up actually clockwise direction in the spiral form, because everything is moving and spinning, because we live in the material world, and matter is basically outcome of the divine thinking. So first you have a thought. It comes first, you have a peace. So the goal of yoga to bring you back to the point when you have no thoughts. When you have no thoughts, then you hit this point of total stillness. Total stillness is the goal of yoga. Total stillness is the goal of Vaastu Shastra, to bring people to stillness, so the mind is not jumping like a monkey. So in order to do that, we need to help ourselves. We help it with yoga, with pranayama, to calm down our mind, with calculations when we breathe, right? And then we do the same calculations for houses. We calculate houses to your specific vibration. And we can find that vibration if we know when you were born and where you were born. So we can calculate your vibration through astrological charts. And then Vaastu Shastra takes that number, basically your nakshatra, that's your birth star, and then it goes into their construction, the calculations. So going back to temples. Temples, they have 16 formulas to calculate space, very strict. Houses are for people, 6 formulas. It's called Ayadi calculations. Aya means searching for the source. So the source is, as in ancient scriptures, it says that the first basically of this Brahma Bindu, it's a dat. Dat, which it was not even a dat. It was just nothingness, called Sunyam Param. Sunyam Param, it means nothingness, but at the same time, everything was in potential to be born and to live life, to die and get reborn again and go into this cycle. So there is a big, there are big numbers, like day of Brahma, for human life, just like that, right? So there is timing and everything involved, and vibration of your own space, your inner energy, your life energy is vibrating with specific frequency. It can be found. So when we know your frequency of vibration, we calculate through the formulas coming from ancient texts, a house, which will be tuned with specific constellation from where other energy is coming and actually elevating you as a soul, as a divine energy. So what happens when your mother was pregnant with you, you were absolutely angel. You had absolute vibration in sequences of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So that is called absolute vibration. And in scriptures it says the interval between 8s is equal to the blink of a human eye. So when we blink, so then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We blink and it goes again. So our body actually functions with movements of eyes, for example, or periodicity of feminine organs like functioning, right? Basically, there are numbers there involved, which are connected to the universal vibration. So when you were a baby inside of your mother's womb, you vibrated with frequencies of 8. As soon as when you were born, you exited that field of energy. At that moment, we look where you were born, what time you were born, what was at the horizon, a specific direction coming down, what kind of beam of energy was coming down. And it's described by Sanskrit letters, sound, and numbers. So all these numbers, there are tables of them. They are basically filtered through these formulas. So we can find your number. So when it's your vibration. And then we build a house. And then we position that house in a specific way. Then we have a unit of energy embedded in the house, which is in resonance with the unit of vibration of the cosmos and you and planet Earth. That is so beautiful. So about the temple, so when you go closer to the shrine, you feel actually the energy. You feel energy. They don't allow us to go inside, of course, because we have special diet, they pray every day, and they do special ceremonies to pacify the mind and just the body. So they're serving there. So the deity in the shrine is not just a rock or something sitting there. No. What it is actually, for example, all the male deities are made from black granite. If you hit the stone with a metal kernel, it will create a sound like zing. It's a very high pitched sound, so they know that stone can be used for male deity. If you hear a rock, and they knew rocks already, and again with a metal instrument, then it creates a deep sound. It's there, it's deep, but it's really low. That is for female deity. And if the rock has no sound, almost like nothing, like boom, that's it. That is only for the pedestal to stand there. So you think, why is that? Well, they just thought that's good. Yeah? No, that's not that simple. It's actually about crystal structure of the rock. The rock is also has its own life energy, so vibration. And if we look down into the microscope, there is a crystal structure, right? So the distances between the particles of the crystal structure, they have distances, they have vibration, right? So that vibration has to be in tune with the vibration of specific constellation. Like Shiva, it's basically a special constellation with a star called Betelgeuse. So that Betelgeuse is a huge red giant, and scientists are saying it will explode sometimes soon. So it's a giant star, and scientists already know that the sound coming from there has a sound like shh, like this. If you look in ancient scriptures related to these calculations, there are 4 sounds which describe the sound coming from that constellation. They're all like this. How did they know? They knew. So this is incredible. When you start studying more and more, you feel like there's more and more actually proofs. That is incredible science. It's not just a fairy tale. It's not just like superstition. Oh, you put this thing here, and everything will be lined up. No, nothing can be just lined up. Here, the space has a problem. For example, what is the problem? See these poles? Because this was a barn probably some time ago, right? So for Vaastu Shastra, house is a live being because it has space which is vibrating. It's a part of universal space. So if it's alive, it has its own structure, Vaastu Purusha Mandala. So that Vaastu Purusha Mandala has heart, has liver, brain, everything, all organs are there in the subtle kind of element. So if we put a physical element like a column in the heart, what do? You kill it. It cannot breathe, it cannot vibrate. So this building has a problem because that central space is right here where this beautiful woman sits with the orange sweater. Yeah, that's called Brahma Stan. Brahma created a stan, place of creation. So we have columns there. And basically, space has difficulty to function, to vibrate. So it's like, and it cannot do anything. So, but if we would remove this and put maybe a beam, yeah, so we would allow the space to actually breathe. The energy would start moving. So that's the same. That's why people feel sometimes uncomfortable in some buildings, and we don't know why. Yeah, just beautiful, maybe design, expensive furniture, but it's just like you sit there, okay, now I want to go home. Or you go somewhere, it's a simple space, there is not much there, but you feel cozy, it feels warm, and it's like, wow, I love it. And then, I just love it. So the first thing is, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel a little bit kind of, maybe even sometimes depressed, it means there is a problem in the space. It has some, basically, violations of the natural law. So mostly structural. And that's why Vaastu Shastra, sometimes a lot of people in India and now in many other countries, because it's became very popular topic actually in Eastern Europe, people say that if I will put this or that or yantra or pyramid or whatever, it will just like boom, the space will be alive again and it will remove all these obstacles. Well, Ganapati Stapati used to tell me, Madam, you have no arm. I'll give you a beautiful earring and put it in your ear. How about your arm? Is it there? He said, that's it. So I was like, okay, because I know it's a big market to sell little things to enhance the energy in the space. It's not nothing, it definitely works. All these things have energy, but in order to really revitalize the space, we need to make structural changes. It's expensive. It is expensive. That's why this Vaastu Shastra is architectural theory and construction. It's not just a little thing here and there. It's really from the scratch. You have to build properly. So if you look at ancient temples, most of them are aligned with grid of energy of the planet. Means true north, not magnetic north, true north, which is axis of rotation of the planet. So why the planet is doing that? Well, because the planet is alive. And that string, invisible line of energy is called it's Brahma Sutra. Brahma created Sutra line of creation. Everybody has a Brahma Sutra. Everybody. Basically, we call it also Sushumna channel. So Sushumna channel, you know from yoga, right? So it's kind of emptiness. That is your sacred space, which is going through your spine. House has the same. So you know why tsunami 2004, it was tsunami, right? Remember? And Dr. Stapati said, Madam, I arrived after tsunami, like 5 days after tsunami. He said, you know, I built this monument, 3 years we spent time, and the engineer in South India did not prove my monument, the Tiruvalluvar. Why? Because I don't have concrete, I don't have the metal reinforcement. I built according to the ancient Shastras. And the monument is alive. And now a tsunami went through, everything was destroyed, a monument was still standing. He said, now government of Tamil Nadu, they gave me their certificate because tsunami tested the monument, it did not crash. And he received this basically approval from the engineer, and he got this title, Padma Bhushan. So, but he said, you know why it did not crash? Because it had open space, no obstructions in the center of the monument. It has a hole, that statue, it's huge, it's like a Statue of Liberty in the United States, very, very tall monument. So he made a hole in the head of the statue of ancient poet. And that hole was going like a shaft through the entire body of the monument and was empty. He said that was the most important. He said if it would be filled with rocks or something, it would collapse. He said because the space is alive and it holds its strength. That's why it's important your spine to keep straight, because you keep that sacred space, you show that straight. That's your strength. So it vibrates. You know, you have lots of energy coming through. So that's the goal, basically. What time is it? And I will show you something else. So that is basically the theory in short. But now I'm going to show you this video. And let's see. I wanted to show you one guy. So he's an architect, and one second. Just real quick, I need to search here what this is. I think maybe this is. Let me see what is playing here. Is it? Oh yeah. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so many of you probably heard this word cymatics, right? Okay. So when in 2005 I came back home and I started searching for resonance, and I found this basically Chladni patterns. So Chladni pattern is it was a scientist, a mathematician, musician. He was 1870s when he rediscovered, which was discovered 100 years before him by another scientist. But what it is, so basically he was playing violin, and he had a cup of tea and the sugar on the plate. And when he played, he noticed that the sugar is moving on the plate. Then he took basically the thing of the violin, yes, and he touched, and it moved even faster. So like, ooh, what is going on here? So I have this. I saved money. My poor husband. I bought like a $1,200 the scientific instrument. So this is not mine, but I did some research, and I will tell you later. So what it is, there is a specific equipment for physics, and it creates electromagnetic vibration, specific frequency. You can set it up, and it comes to this metal plate, and at the center there's a point where it just holds itself. So the plate starts vibrating with the frequency coming into that, and whatever powder is there, it distributes itself in a beautiful design. That is the mandala. And you know what it is? It's actually cross-section of the sound of that frequency. That's why yantras are cross-sections of specific structures. Okay? So this is simple, and it's sacred, but it's simple. So this bubble of sound, it's actually a bubble. The physical sound is a bubble, and it basically goes through space. That's why when you chant, and if you chant in unison, it's a big bubble which is floating through space, because we have a lot of basically air elements and moving, and it goes through building, it goes outside, and whoever is inside, you are affected, because you have matter, and that is also material sound. So that's why you get affected by sound. That's what yesterday we were talking about, right? About the sound and how it affects us. So the sound is a bubble, physical sound, and this cross section is here. But this guy, he's an architect. He was doing some research. What he hired somebody, mathematician, and they created a program which would generate 3D structure of the sound. His mistake was, and it's not I discovered that, there is one man in England, John Reid. He actually designed CIMAscope based on this idea. And he sent me a link to this video. He said the big mistake he made, the architect, he's thinking that if he would use that bubble of that specific sound for people, it's going to heal them. He said nope, because when you use basically spherical space, it's not going to work. It's only rectangular space creates this. So the plate by itself, metal plate, mostly square, sometimes a circle. You know what? In Vaastu Shastra, Vaastu Mandala is a square. Why? Because the cube of energy, consciousness, the unit of consciousness is a tiny little cube. So everything is in cubes. So the ideal building is square base of the building, or rectangular with specific proportion. So numbers are important, dimensions are very important. So that dimension is very important. It's called angular. So let's see what he did here, because I want you to see. So they use basically different frequencies, and you see the different design.
We were able to do this dozens, not hundreds of times, and get out individual fingerprints, each unique, like a snowflake, for various tones. Keep in mind, these are two-dimensional representations of a three-dimensional process. And as we started to study them, I could decipher general rules to their organization. As frequency increases, so does the complexity of the pattern. You can see that the lowest frequency at the top left is much more basic than the highest frequency at the bottom right. Additionally, every cymatic pattern is symmetrical about an axis, and this shouldn't be surprising to think about sound. It's traveling in all directions at the same speed. And so being a branch of physics, it can be defined by math. And if it can be defined by math, it can be put into the computer. And so that's exactly what I did. Designed an algorithm in my 3D modeling software that allows me to recreate the cymatic process in real time, based on frequency, wavelength, amplitude. And then I can tell the computer, identify the symmetrical axes And instead of mirroring as in 2D, we start to think of orbiting for symmetry in 3 dimensions. This allows me to now visualize the spatial configurations of each of these unique tones and manipulate them in real time. I apologize for the lagging computers, pretty complex math, but it's a fascinating process. I can't get enough of it, actually.
That's a sound structure. That's what we do. We generate the sounds. And when we chant mantra, they're very special structures.
So this being said, instead of dozens or hundreds of 2D prints, I know how to process for iteratively creating dozens or hundreds of 3-dimensional spatial configurations. So I began to organize them based on frequency. Seeking frequency-based organizational patterns, and thinking back to Pisa, I thought, why don't I start to group these things by harmonic frequencies? So these are 3D prints of a harmonic triad, a B-flat major to be specific. What I was surprised by was that the tones that have a harmonic audible relationship also have similar formal arrangements. You can almost imagine form A evolving into form B, evolving into form C. And here's the tones that created these. Here's an A minor, and its created tones. And my wife's favorite is C major. So, as we start to envision these as an habitable space, we know.
So here he is continuing basically how he would use the sound structure as an architectural form. So in Vaastu Shastra, we use subtle sound structure in architectural form, not physical. That's the biggest difference. So the subtle structure is actually straight lines, rectangular, and this is based on the grid pattern. So if we use subtle structure of space in our building, which we used for thousands of years, as you see, people built like this, mostly houses, right? Then we actually are getting very close to the peaceful building. If we're using buildings with a circular structure, you will not find peace there because the energy is moving all the time. That's why it's good for marketplaces, for stages like amphitheaters. That's why we're running, killing each other in ancient times. We were bulls, because that's what space was doing to people. Right? And subconsciously, people do that. What is subconsciously? We discuss this intuition, right? And instinct and stuff, so it works. So a lot of architects, unfortunately, nowadays we've forgotten these rules. But Washington, D.C., Baltimore is designed by Freemasons, okay? Why I think that way? Because Freemasons, the French, they came and the D.C., if you check on White House, on Capitol building, exactly to cardinal directions, okay? So, city has a grid pattern that is sacred. Whenever you go Manhattan, almost 45 degrees, there's straight lines, but shift. People are running there, making money, you can't relax. So because everything is shifted, so shift has a name. So when we do that, we don't put buildings under the big angles. They're almost cardinal directions, and I will explain later why. So anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I wanted to actually to connect in the beginning of my lecture, and that you would listen to the sound of the ocean. And I wanted you to make a little meditation, but maybe you could try now, because we don't have internet, I was told. So I wanted to actually turn on the ocean sound, the waves. And what I would like to ask you to imagine now, the ocean waves coming in and out. You close your eyes and you imagine first square, which is about your height. And that square is divided into 9 by 9 lines, and you're standing in that square, in that grid pattern, and it's luminous. It's like a glowing with beautiful blue light. And every line of energy is aligned with your body. And you're standing there and absorbing this beautiful energy of that pattern, because it's your sacred pattern, and it vibrates with your specific frequency. And imagine the sound of the ocean in and out, and align the central part of that grid pattern with your navel, maybe a little bit higher. That will be your Brahma Bindu, the central part of your structure. So that line of energy is very sacred, and it's connected to the space, a space to the actually the divine. So that line is going through your spine, and it goes also under 90 degrees through your stomach area, where you have other big chakra. So that is all aligned with universal grid of energy, and it's called basically Paramatma, Para Super Atma Atom, and that is Vishva Purusha Mandala. So when you're aligned, you go in a slow motion. That is your meditation. You merge with that energy, and you could hear later when you go to sleep. Try to hear that sound of the ocean, because ocean brings waves in specific frequency, which is connected to the frequency of vibration of the space. That's why we love it. Just sit a little bit. Imagine the ocean of divine light and physical ocean going into resonance with you. Inhalation.